Caleb's hands, stained with the oil and grease of his trade, lovingly caressed the curves of a cherry-red '57 Chevrolet Bel Air, the chrome gleaming under the flickering fluorescence of his garage. The air was rich with the aroma of leather and metal, a testament to his devotion to an era long past. This sanctuary of nostalgia was more than just a livelihood. It was a reverent homage to the halcyon days of 1950s Americana, where each polished fender and restored bench seat represented a piece of history lovingly preserved. Amidst the classic chassis and souped-up engines, his life with Laura unfolded with the same meticulous care he afforded his cars. She, a conflict negotiator by trade, brought a calm that balanced his methodical nature, crafting a partnership as seamless and enduring as the vintage beauties that surrounded them. Their shared existence in the coastal town, with its slow rhythm and unassuming charm, was a tranquil contrast to the silent tempest of secrets and lies that lay ahead. Ellie's keen eye peered through the viewfinder of her camera, capturing the quiet moments that often went unnoticed. Her latest passion project, a documentary on personal betrayal, was slowly taking shape, shaped by the stories of heartache and resilience from those brave enough to share. Caleb, though not one to indulge in dramatics, found himself drawn into her world, the empathetic lens through which she viewed her subjects unnervingly relatable. As they interviewed a man who spoke in subdued tones about the loss of trust in his marriage, Caleb felt an unspoken kinship. Each story of duplicity echoed in the hollow chambers of insecurity he had never noticed within himself. The conversations that branched out from these interviews meandered into the night, with Ellie and Caleb discussing the fragility of human connections beneath the dim glow of the garage's neon sign. Amid these revelations, the quaint town was abuzz with eager anticipation. Posters of classic cars adorned shop windows, and banners announcing the yearly car show fluttered in the coastal breeze. It was here, within the heart of the community, that Caleb's dedication shone brightest. Each year, his restorations debuted to awe and reverence, celebrating the craftsmanship of a bygone era. But amidst this bustle, subtle ripples disturbed the calm surface of Caleb's life. Laura's furrowed brow became a more frequent sight, and her eyes often carried the weight of undisclosed thoughts. Late-night calls pulled her away from the quiet dinners, her voice a hushed whisper as she spoke with someone Caleb could not see. When questioned, her smile was quick but didn't quite reach her eyes, attributing her preoccupation to the demands of a high-profile case. Caleb's instinct urged him to pry, to uncover the root of this shift, but his trust in Laura held firm. He attributed the unease to the seasonal chaos and convinced himself that the storm of her work would eventually pass, revealing once more the woman he knew and loved. It was an exercise in self-persuasion, as much as it was a testament to the unwavering stability he had always cherished in their relationship. Ellie's project progressed, her camera becoming an extension of her being, capturing the raw edges of human emotion with a tender, yet unflinching gaze. Caleb was there beside her, aiding in technical setups or simply offering a quiet presence, his own understanding of betrayal unwittingly deepening with each testimony they chronicled. It was during these sessions that Caleb first felt the tremors that hinted at cracks in his own life's facade, though he was not yet ready to confront them. The car show loomed ever closer, a beacon in the calendar that ordinarily brought Caleb a sense of pride and purpose. This year, the excitement was tinged with distraction, as if the vibrant colors of the classic cars had been muted by the grayness encroaching on his thoughts. The unrest within him grew, fed by the minutiae of change, the slight hesitations in Laura's voice, the occasional guarded glance, the scent of an unfamiliar cologne lingering just a moment too long. Despite the unease, Caleb poured himself into his work, the restoration of a cherry-red 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air convertible. Its sleek lines and polished chrome were testament to countless hours of labor, its revitalized beauty a metaphor for the life Caleb yearned to maintain. He sought refuge in the familiar scent of leather and oil, the soothing rhythm of his tools a welcome escape from the whispers of doubt that sought to invade his sanctuary. But no amount of denial could shield him from the accumulation of small, peculiar occurrences. A hastily ended phone call as he entered the room. An unexpected late meeting without a trace of documentation littering Laura's usually cluttered workspace. The occasional glimpse of sadness in Laura's eyes, hastily veiled behind a facade of normalcy when she caught Caleb's concerned gaze. Caleb wrestled with his instinct to investigate and his desire to remain trusting. He reminded himself of Laura's integrity and the strength of their bond, considering these aberrations nothing more than the ebb and flow of a relationship weathered by time and external pressures. Yet even as he sought solace in the reliability of his daily routine, the seeds of doubt, once sown, were stubbornly sprouting, nurtured by the very tranquility he cherished. Ellie, too preoccupied with her documentary to notice the subtleties of her brother's situation, was nonetheless a comforting presence. Her focus on truth and revelation, so central to her work, stood in stark contrast to the murky waters of uncertainty that were beginning to rise around Caleb. She was so engrossed in her project that the weight of the world around her seemed to dissolve when she peered through her viewfinder. It was through this lens that she inadvertently captured fragments of stories she hadn't intended to tell, stories that would soon resonate with Caleb on the most personal of levels. The day of the classic car show dawned clear and bright, the kind of day that seems to hold nothing but promise. As the coastal town awoke, vintage cars began to trickle onto the seafront, gleaming under the early sun like jewels from a bygone era. Caleb arrived early, the Bel Air in tow, its cherry-red surface glistening as though it too was aware of the significance of the event. Caleb moved around his beloved car with a practiced eye, polishing here, adjusting there, ensuring that every detail was perfect. People began to gather in admiration, casting appreciative glances at the vehicle's restored magnificence. Caleb offered polite nods and modest thanks to the compliments, yet there was a hollowness in his interactions, a fissure in his facade that he couldn't quite plaster over. Meanwhile, Ellie was setting up her documentary stand, a mosaic of human experiences displayed through poignant photographs and impactful snippets of interviews. The townspeople were drawn to the stand, intrigued by the raw honesty captured in each frame. Caleb, in his distraction, barely registered the stand's presence until he was almost upon it, ready to lend a hand with the heavier equipment. That's when he saw it. Among the various images of joy, pain, and redemption, there it was, a photo that commanded his attention like an unexpected blow. Laura and a man, not just any acquaintance but someone considered a friend, locked in an intimate embrace. His heart lurched, the clamor of the car show receding to a muffled echo as he tried to reconcile the image before him with the reality he thought he knew. Caleb's first instinct was denial. This couldn't be Laura. It must be some mistake. But as his brain fought for rational explanations, his eyes traced the undeniable truth etched into the stolen moment Ellie had captured. The intimacy wasn't merely physical. It was etched in their closed eyes, their hands clasped tightly. It was then that the grayness which had been seeping into Caleb's vision consumed him entirely, the colors around him leaching away until all that remained was the stark, cold realization that his world had just tilted on its axis. He felt as if the ground beneath him was crumbling, the foundation of his life, his marriage, revealing deep, hidden fissures. Caleb's ears rang with the silence of his own shock, the hum of the crowd now distant. He stood there, motionless, the photograph pinning him in place. He noticed the way Laura's hair fell lightly over her shoulder, the way the man's thumb gently brushed her skin. These were details Caleb would have once attributed to a carefully restored car, a symbol of perfection and attention to detail, and now they were evidence of a flaw, a defect in the storybook narrative of his marriage. A voice broke through his reeling thoughts, an innocent query that under normal circumstances would have been welcome. "Stunning piece, isn't it? They look so in love," remarked an elderly woman beside him, assuming Caleb was just another observer. Caleb managed a nod, unable to form words. His nod was mechanical, an automatic reflex as he struggled to keep his composure in the sea of onlookers. He could feel the weight of Ellie's gaze on him, catching the moment his world stopped. She was about to approach him, her own expression a mixture of concern and confusion. Before she could speak, Caleb turned abruptly, his back to the photo, to the crowd, to the piercing sunlight that somehow felt too harsh, too scrutinizing. Like a man walking through a fog, he wandered back to his car, his sanctuary of chrome and steel. The Bel Air, once a beacon of accomplishment, now loomed before him, its shine a glaring contrast to the dull ache in his chest. People were still there, admiring it, yet their voices were muffled, their faces blurred. He couldn't see them anymore, not really. Their words of praise fell on deaf ears. Their questions about the car's restoration received murmurs or distracted nods. The car show, which should have been the culmination of his hard work and passion, had become a backdrop to a personal revelation that changed everything. As he opened the hood of the car mechanically to show the polished engine, his hands, usually so steady and sure, trembled slightly. Caleb was a man well versed in the art of restoration, of mending what was broken and worn to a state of former glory. But as he stood there, looking at the gleaming engine, a testament to countless hours of labor, he knew that the art of mending the mechanical was a far cry from healing the human heart. There was no manual, no guidebook for the latter. The meticulous methods he employed in his garage betrayed him in the real world where emotions were far more volatile than any engine he'd ever encountered. Caleb felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find Ellie's eyes, filled with silent apology. Her touch, meant to comfort, only served to remind him of the photograph she had inadvertently taken, of the truth it held. He looked at his sister, her presence a solace in the coldness that had settled into his bones. "Let's talk," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the chatter around them. It was not a request. He nodded, and together they walked away from the crowds, away from the car show and the bright sunlight, into the quiet dimness of his garage nearby, his refuge, where the smell of oil and leather could replace the chaos of betrayal, if only for a moment. Once inside, they settled on a pair of old, mismatched office chairs amidst the organized clutter of car parts and tools. Ellie waited for Caleb to speak, but when the silence stretched on, she began hesitantly, "Caleb, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Caleb held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. His eyes, usually so clear and focused, were clouded with a confusion that echoed the turmoil he felt within. "I know you didn't, Elle. You couldn't have known." Taking a deep breath, he looked around his sanctuary, at the framed photographs of restored beauties lining the walls, at the tools neatly hanging in their designated spots, and he felt a pang for the order he loved, which now seemed so elusive. Ellie reached out, her gaze steady on her brother. "What will you do, Caleb?" His voice was quiet when he finally spoke, the words weighed with a heaviness that felt foreign on his tongue. "I don't know. I can't just buff out this scratch and touch up the paint. This isn't something I can fix with my hands." They sat in silence, the bond of siblings providing a wordless understanding. Eventually, Caleb stood and picked up a rag, running it absently through his hands. He looked at Ellie, a sad smile touching the corners of his mouth. "You know, all these years, I've been living in the past, reviving it, cherishing it," he said, his voice trailing off as he gazed at a 1957 Chevy Bel Air he had recently restored. "Maybe I thought our love was like these cars, classic, timeless. But unlike these machines," he gestured around the garage, "love isn't something you can restore to its original condition once it's been damaged. It changes. It evolves." Ellie nodded, understanding. "People aren't cars, Caleb. They're complex, unpredictable, capable of both incredible love and profound hurt." Caleb sighed, dropping the rag onto a workbench. "I guess I have to learn how to navigate that complexity. It's just, I never thought I would have to do it without her." Ellie moved to sit closer to her brother, her voice gentle. "But you're not alone. You have people who care about you, who want to help you through this. And you're stronger than you think. He met her gaze, the ghost of resolve flickering in his eyes. I've always believed in fixing things, not throwing them away. But maybe some things can't go back to the way they were. You might not be able to go back, but you can move forward, Caleb. You can grow from this. Ellie's words hung in the air, poignant with the promise of hope amidst the pain. Caleb nodded slowly, the mechanic in him understanding the metaphor of a road yet traveled, with its inevitable bumps and turns. I'll need time, he admitted, his voice steadier now, reflecting the beginnings of acceptance. And maybe I'll find a way to rebuild, not just cars, but whatever's left in the aftermath of all this. Ellie stood and hugged her brother, her embrace tight and reassuring. Take all the time you need, she whispered. And remember, the most beautiful roads are the ones that lead to new horizons. They pulled away from the hug, and a faint smile appeared on Caleb's face, a sign that he was still there, beneath the hurt and the confusion, the man who could find beauty in the old, and now, perhaps, in the beginning of something new.